VJ Edgecombe entered the year as one of the most highly touted prospects in the class, and about halfway through the season, he's shown why that was the case as a supreme athlete with high feel and the ability to wreak havoc as a defensive playmaker and convert on the other end. But there's still been some big questions offensively due to his cold start as a shooter, some of his struggles as a creator, and what all that could mean at his size. So let's jump into his game, what'll be watched down the stretch, and where he could end up in a class that's still pretty wide open beyond the first few picks. Now, a huge part of what makes VJ an effective player and compelling prospect is what he brings defensively. He's probably the best athlete in the class with exceptional explosiveness and movement abilities, and that matched with his instincts and hands has made him one of the most impactful defensive playmakers in the country. He's currently putting up steal and block rates that have only been replicated a few times before by underclassmen and guards especially, with a steal rate around 4.5 and a block rate around 3.5. He's shined off the ball and has a very good grasp of his help responsibilities and has been a pest in passing lanes, coming up with deflections, steals, and turning defense into offense. And he's even provided a little help at the rim and frequently stepped up into plays or been in gaps, which has forced turnovers and missed shots that don't always show up in the stat sheet but have been noticeable. And the fact that he's already got this number of chase downs about 14.5 games into the season is pretty impressive and a product of his great athleticism and effort.
Gives it on the baseline, and the pass is stolen away. Breakaway. Rob Wright is back.
Has the steal. They're looking to push it 2-on-1. Boogie
Now on the ball, he's been a positive presence too, providing ball pressure and staying connected at the point of attack. Now playing with Nunn and Roach, he hasn't usually had that primary or point guard assignment, so it hasn't been a high volume of screen navigation or those type of reps, which I kind of wish we saw more of because that'll be asked of him in the league, but he has been solid in those moments and come up with a handful of pokeaways. Now overall, I think this aspect of his defense can be slightly oversold. I don't think he's a Cason Wallace or a Dyson Daniels or even like an Anthony Black type of natural mover for recent reference, but he's gotten the job done.
Lewis picked up by Edgecombe. Knocks it away. Edgecombe recovers.
Three is they're trying to crack this game wide open. That was one of those cases where the ball probably did lie on that position.
Now there have been moments where he's been caught ball watching and losing his responsibility when they played zone. He can also clean up closeouts and do his work a little earlier on ball, and while he's battled, there have been some mismatches against bigger wings and forwards that have been at least somewhat difficult for him to handle in moments. But overall, I buy him as an impact guy defensively and one of the best among guards and wings in the class, and I'm very interested to see how the rest of the season goes for him. Now on the offensive end, VJ has been a much bigger work in progress, which to some extent was expected, and this will ultimately determine where everything goes for him in the future. But we'll start positively as we work our way into things. A lot of his production has come from his ability to make plays on defense and get out and run in transition like we mentioned, but this has been by far his most efficient play type and his second most in volume via synergy. His combination of explosiveness off 1 or 2 feet at the rim, his open floor speed when running lanes on the wing, and even sometimes taking the ball the length of the floor stand out. And I think in the right situation, he's got the tools to continue producing here quite a bit. Now that is always a hard thing to rely on fully for consistent production unless you're like a freak of nature like Amin Thompson or obviously the complete stars like LeBron and Giannis and those guys, but it has been a big part of what he brings.
Lost the ball, another turnover. Omer pushing it out. Edgecombe with the flush.
Chance for some more, no doubt. Bears run it the other way. There's Edgecombe.
Now the half court is where it's been a lot more mixed, and he hasn't had the type of performances you'd love to see in the biggest games of the year with these quiet halves. So with that, I'm going to try to talk about everything at once. He's always profiled as more of an off-ball and spot-up scoring threat, and that has continued to be the case. On the positive side of things, he's had some good moments as a cutter, both in design situations and more improvised looks, some of which haven't always led to buckets for himself, but he has created good offense from those situations. does. He's also been one of the better offensive rebounders in the country for his size, which is again credit to his athleticism and then also his feel and timing. So I've liked what he's done there. Now he did get off to a cold start from three, shooting just 24% on 4 attempts a game in his first 8 contests this year, which included a 1 for 10 start against Gonzaga in Arkansas. But in his last 7 games, which has kind of flown under the radar, he's at 39% on nearly 5 attempts. So while he's still at only 32% on the year and a similar number on his catch and shoot splits, there's at least been some positive growth there to lean on and feel encouraged about. I'd always been a little skeptical of his jumper before I dove into his history as a shooter, and there's some things there mechanically I want to talk about later on, but he has this positive track record as a shooter off the catch that I still think is worth valuing, with an over 200 shot catch and shoot sample during his 2 years at Lehigh, where he shot nearly 44%, and that's via synergy. So the second half of the season will be telling, and Baylor will need it in all of these important games, so we'll see how much of an impact he can make as a shooter, because it's obviously going to be a key component to him being a consistent threat offensively. Now, I believe we talked about this in the preseason, but I also really like him as a passer, and I think everything that he does here is functional and will translate to the next level. Now, the volume of overall playmaking will be determined by his handle and growth as a scorer, which we'll get to, but he's shown all the connective qualities. He's got very good feel here. He makes routine extra passes, he plays with his eyes up in transition, and he's had a good share of moments off the advantages that he does create on driving kicks, and even some flashes in the pick and roll, keeping defenders on his hip and manipulating that big into committing as he makes a dump off. Now, some of the precision, the accuracy, and versatility in his passes could be a lot better. It's obvious he doesn't have those type of reps as a point guard, and I think some of his decision making can be better downhill in terms of taking an attempt at the rim or passing, but this is probably my favorite part of his offense and something I think suggests there's more to build on in the future.
Kicked in the corner. Offense for Baylor a little bit stagnant right now.
Couple of options. It's Celestine. Too strong.
Lewis being an all-around player. Best scorers out there hounding Edgecombe.
Now, where many of his issues still reside in to this point is in his self-creation and overall efficiency. He still has some terrific tools and the ability to get to spots on the floor as an athlete that many others just don't, and we'll talk about that. But right now, his struggles to handle the ball consistently and shoot the pull-up, and some finishing issues at the rim have held him back from taking that next step offensively, and that then brings up the question of where you value him even more, because he isn't like 6'6" or 6'7" and able to do some of those full-time wing things as easily in the league. He's had moments where he's gotten out of control and lost the ball and has been unable to capitalize on an advantage as a pull-up shooter, and sometimes overdriven. He's just 3 for 19 on pull-ups and still hasn't looked particularly comfortable in those situations either. Finishing numbers have been mediocre at best, and his process on layups hasn't been particularly good. Now, we can't just throw out dunks because that's going to slant against anyone remotely athletic, but he's often attacked bodies trying to hang in the air, but he hasn't been savvy enough to turn those into free throw attempts as often as you'd like, and his touch and creativity isn't quite there to pull these contested looks off more consistently. I think being more in control, playing off a 2 and finding angles around defenders instead of always over them would help as early as this year, so I'm curious to see where this goes, because 44% on layups definitely stands out.
Edgecombe, he can't get through.
To him out and see how we could
Now, overall, he still had these moments where you can see his upside as a driver and a potential advantage creator, and that's why there is reason for optimism. He's got a lightning quick first step, his handle has at least improved over the last couple years, and he's navigated traffic better than before. And of course, plays attacking closeouts and shifted defenses have been there. Now, I wouldn't anticipate he's going to turn into a different player or deserve a different role overnight, but I do think there are certain things that he's able to do with his fast twitch and natural gifts that give him a little more to work with long term, and part of the second half of the season, I guess, will be in seeing how much of that is there and is plausible to buy into.
Baylor 7 of 25, 28% from the field. Edgecombe raises up and uses the addition to this Arizona program. Edgecombe is the basket. 11 points off the bench for Cade Phillips. Edgecombe, giant steps.
Here's Edgecombe. Crosses it over and will go to the line.
Does Edgecombe have the answer? What a take by Edgecombe.
We've seen in the non-conference. 3 on the shot clock. Edgecombe's got to go. And he does off the window.
Now the Big 12 isn't as strong as it's been in recent years, but Baylor playing Houston twice is a very good challenge for VJ. They're extremely connected defensively and they've got good athletes that collectively can match him in ways, so I'll be interested to see how he performs in those games specifically. Kansas had too high of expectations, but that'll be a competitive one too. And then prospect matchup wise, you've got BYU with Yeager Dimon, which could be super interesting if they actually match up. You've got Darian Williams at Texas Tech. West Virginia's got DeFreeze and Small. There's some others in there too. So solid group of games left on the schedule for him to show his game, and some time for Baylor to try to put themselves near the top of the conference by March. Now VJ is someone I still pretty strongly believe should be considered in the top 5 to 10 of this class. His combination of athleticism, defensive impact, feel, and at least progress offensively is a hard one to fade, and even in the lackluster scoring nights, he's still been able to have a positive impact on these games. Now I would understand being lower on him because of some of his limitations as a self-creator and skepticism in his shot, and I personally wouldn't rule out dropping him a little further for those reasons at that size, but looking at him as a long-term play, he has too many attributes not to contribute and unlock more in the process, but we'll see how everything plays out the rest of the year. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and leave a comment down below of what you think of VJ's game and his performance so far this season. As always, I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.